Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Xony, and today we're going to have some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further, let's go. Now let's get into today's stories to find out what happened. I 32 male and my wife 29 female and I have been together for 8 years, and they were some of the happiest of my life. Things are complicated now, but I knew that I loved her from the moment I met her. She was a sweet, smart girl, and she was pretty much everything I wanted. We got married after only dating each other for about 6 months. Everybody told us that it was way too soon, but neither of us cared to listen. We knew that we wanted to be together, so we went to the courthouse and signed the papers. I know it's not the most romantic of stories, but it's what we both wanted at the time. When we first got together, one of the biggest arguments would be about money. Neither of us had really good jobs at the time and things were tight. We pulled all of our money together, and then we would argue about what we would spend it on, whether that be buying something for the house or saving to buy our own home. A couple of years ago, I got an incredible promotion at work and things took a turn for us. We had more money than we ever thought we would, and we decided to start a family. So we put a down payment on a house, and once everything was set up there, we started trying to have a baby. It didn't take long for us to get pregnant, and everything seemed to be going well. About 6 months into my wife's pregnancy, I was very overwhelmed with everything. I was going to be a father, and I would have a whole life depending on me for 18 years. It was a lot to take in, and honestly, I could have handled it better. I was scared, and I threw myself into work trying to avoid that feeling. I didn't take my wife's feelings into consideration at all. I just wanted to forget about my worries. Because of my emotional distance, I didn't notice anything was off during the rest of the pregnancy. The baby came, and both of us were completely obsessed with him. It changed our personalities and demeanor quite a bit. Unfortunately, when I was working a lot more during a pregnancy, I set a standard for myself that I had to upkeep. After the baby was born, I didn't get to spend a lot of time with them, which was hard to deal with. I took 3 weeks off right after the baby was born, but after that, it was back to normal for me at work. I started to notice that there was something off in the relationship about 8 months after our son was born. It was around the holidays, and thankfully my job gave us an entire week off with Christmas and New Year's. I was really looking forward to the time off to spend with my family and celebrate my son's first Christmas. With the time at home, I noticed that my wife was very distant. I finally had the time to relax and be with her, but she didn't even seem to want me to touch her. On top of that, she was being very sneaky about her phone. I kind of thought that she was doing something Christmas related and didn't want me to see it because it was supposed to be a surprise. But after Christmas came and went and she was still doing it, I started to get a little worried. One afternoon she passed out on the couch after she put her son down for a nap, and I took advantage of the opportunity to see what she was being so sneaky about. I grabbed her phone and looked through it to see what was going on. I felt like I had been punched in the gut when I realized she was having an affair. It was the last thing I ever expected to see from her. I knew there had been some growing tension between us due to my work schedule, but I would have never expected her to cheat. I found countless messages from some random man where they were sexting and exchanging nude photos. The man was very clearly fetishizing my wife's postpartum body. This is kind of gross, but he was very interested in her breasts, if you get me with that. I felt like my entire world was shattering around me. I just had a baby with this woman and she was cheating on me. It was absolutely horrifying to learn. At first glance, I couldn't determine whether or not they had met up to be with each other or not. It didn't make the situation any better thinking that it was exclusively an online affair, but I needed to know if she had actually had intimate with that man. I scored through her phone, looking for any sign that they had been together in person. There were a few video and phone calls between them that left me wondering what they discussed. I did notice that shortly after one video call, the man texted her a 3-digit number. I could only assume that it was a room number. I gathered as much evidence from her phone as I could, including every bit of detail I could find about the man she was talking to. It was obvious from the messages that he knew about me. He had an affair with a woman that he knew was married and just had a baby. It was all very disgusting. I put the phone back where it was and pretended like everything was normal while I looked into the man. It didn't take too long for me to find him. I did an image search of him and I found a Reddit account where he posted a lot of lewd pictures of himself. On top of that, he was in a lot of pain. Of pervy subreddits about pregnancy and women who have just given birth. That's how I figured out how he met my wife. Her post was pretty harmless. It was in a supportive pregnancy community where she posted a picture comparing her belly before pregnancy and at different stages. Most of the comments were from other women and were very uplifting, telling her it was natural and beautiful, etc. But that's where I saw this man's comment. He mentioned that a pregnant belly was the most beautiful and attractive thing to a man. She thanked him and I guess from there they started talking. In my search, I also learned that he had a family. He had been married for years and his children were adults, but their finding out about his affair would destroy them still. I tried to figure out what to do about everything. Should I wake my wife up and confront her? Should I try to find the man's wife and tell everything to her? Should I ignore it and try to live a happy life pretending like I didn't know any better? I decided that I was going to sleep on it and pretend like everything was normal until I had a good plan moving forward. My wife was still being sneaky with her phone over the next few days while I was being sneaky with mine as I looked for a divorce attorney. Every so often, I would take a look at her phone to see if there were any plans being made to meet the man again. As my luck would have it, a couple of days after I found out about their affair, I agreed to meet at a motel in town. My wife asked me if I could take care of our son while she went to help her sister out with something. I asked for more details, knowing that it was a lie. She just told me that her sister needed help cleaning out her garage. I ended up calling my mother and telling her what was going on and asking her to babysit while I went to confront my wife and the man in person. My mom came right over and I made my way over to the motel they were staying in. I had the room number and everything. I got there and I banged on the door waiting for them to open up. It took a minute, but a man opened the door with the latch still on so I couldn't get in. He was obviously wrapped up in sheets as if I had interrupted them while they were together. He asked me who I was and I told him that my wife was in there. My wife looked over and immediately tried to excuse why she was there. The man let me in and it took everything in my power not to tackle him to the ground and beat him up. I confronted both of them, telling them that they were disgusting and everything that they were doing was wrong. I told my wife that I would be divorcing her and there was nothing she could do about it. I stormed out and drove right home. I told my mother what happened and we grabbed my son and went right over to her house. I ended up finding the man's wife on Facebook and sending her a friend request. She accepted it not long after and I sent her a message detailing everything I had discovered, attaching some of the pictures and screenshots that I had of their conversations. She didn't respond to the messages but she did read them. My wife called me and left me dozens of text messages trying to explain what was going on. She tried to put the blame on me for being so absent during her pregnancy when she needed someone. She said that she felt like she was being neglected in the relationship, so she was forced to find someone outside of it. It was complete BS. She could have come to me and told me how she was feeling, and I would have made every effort to fix what I was doing. She used that distance in our relationship to have an affair, and that was all there was to it. I was looking through Facebook one day out of curiosity, and I saw that the woman I contacted about the messages posted a long message announcing her divorce. In the message she mentioned how they were together for 25 years, and it was a very difficult decision, but she found out that her husband was carrying on several online affairs and had cheated in person countless times. I felt bad because I thought I was the one to break this news to her, but then again, it was best that she knew. I ended up getting divorced from my wife, and now I have full custody of our son, because I'm the one with a full-time job. My wife is living with her sister, and struggling to find a job for herself. She wasn't awarded any spousal support in the divorce, and if she wants to have any shared custody of our son, she needs to be able to support herself and him. I don't know how long it's going to take her, but until I know my son is going to be well cared for, I'm not budging on my stance. Now let's get into the second story. My wife and I have been together for almost 15 years. We were actually introduced through our mothers because they were very good friends. The more they would talk to each other about us, the more they realized that we would be perfect together. They shocked both of us with a surprise blind date, where they invited us over and left us completely alone. It was very obvious what they were doing, but neither of us really cared because we did have a connection. We ended up deciding to go on a real date together to see what might come of our relationship. 2 years later, we're getting married and planning our family. About 3 years ago, we decided that we wanted to stop renting our home and move into a nice little house in the suburbs. We searched for houses and we finally found one that was perfect for what we wanted. It was in a good school district, it had plenty of rooms, and it was close to my work. When we moved, everybody in the neighborhood was very inviting. It was almost like something out of a television show from the 80s. People came over and introduced themselves to us, bringing us little welcome baskets, inviting us over for dinner parties to get to know us better, etc. It was everything we wanted in our suburban dream. My wife started getting very involved in some community event planning. She was doing it mostly to make friends. Every time she would come back from a meeting, she would immediately tell me about all of the crazy things the other women on the committee were saying. Our little suburban community seemed innocent at first, but behind closed doors, things were not what they seemed. She would tell me about people who were having affairs, people who were getting divorced, people who were swinging, etc. There was a lot going on. My wife and I promised each other that we would never end up like any of those people. I kept my promise, but she decided she didn't want to. There was one man who lived down the street from us who had always somewhat rubbed me the wrong way. He was married and he had 2 children, but that didn't stop him from flirting with all of the other women on the block. It sounds bad to say this, but they really liked his attention. He was a good-looking guy. He was younger than a lot of the other men on the block and he had a very charming personality. I could see why the women were swooning over him. I had spoken to him a few times, but we weren't close by any means, so I was surprised to come home from work one day to find him in my kitchen. My wife was talking to him and drinking a cup of tea. Right away I was a little uneasy about him being there. I knew how he was with the other married women on the block and my suspicions were raised. From the way my wife acted when I walked in, it seemed like they were just chatting and having a cup of tea. When he left, I asked my wife about why he was there and she said that he stopped by to see if he could borrow some lawn shears and they just started chatting. I told my wife that I wasn't comfortable with her having him in the house without me present and she agreed not to have him over again. Months passed and I had forgotten all about the incident. It didn't seem like he was coming back over to the house and my wife never really mentioned him. My job has some pretty demanding hours. I'm the head of my department and I can sometimes get caught up in the process. Called in for double shifts, night shifts, etc. I tried to do as much of my work for home as possible because of that. So we have 2 computers in the house, my work laptop and the family computer. One night around 11 p.m. I got a call from work asking me to review something that was going wrong. I typically will look at it remotely before I go into the office to see if there's anything I can troubleshoot from home. I forgot my laptop at work, so I hopped onto the family computer to log in. Our children were young at the time, and most of what they looked up on the internet tended to be funny videos online and games to play with their friends. We had a lot of safety blockers on the computer as well. I was surprised to see that those safety blockers were disabled. I thought that maybe my wife might have done that to look something up and forgotten to turn them back on. We had a long talk before getting the computer about internet safety, and I was annoyed that she had been careless with it. I reminded myself to tell her about it the following day and just go about my work. I logged in, did what I had to do remotely, and solved the problem. When I went to remove my work information from the internet history, I saw something that caught my eye. How to hide an affair was recently searched with several articles on the same subject. I knew right away that the only person in the house who could have Googled something like that was my wife, but I didn't know why she was looking it up. Yes, I worked a lot, but when I was home nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. The more I looked through the search history, I saw more alarming searches. She had been looking for apps to try and hide text messages, cheap prepaid phones, and affordable injury. It was just a lot of red flags. On top of that, it was on our family computer, where our children could have stumbled upon that search history. My wife was sound asleep when I got back to our bedroom, so I grabbed her phone and decided to see if she had put any of the advice in the articles to good use. I didn't see any of the apps that had been referenced in the articles, and I didn't see any text messages that were confirming anything. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I called out of work the next day, and when the kids were outside, I sat my wife down to have a conversation. I told her about what I found, and she immediately shut down any suspicion I had that she was cheating. She told me that one of the other wives on the block had been talking to her about her own cheating suspicions. My wife said that she hopped onto the computer to search for ways that they might be able to confirm if he was or not. In hindsight, I might have believed it so easily because I didn't want to think that my wife was the one cheating. But looking back now, I realized that if something like that had actually happened, my wife would have come to me and told me all of it. I told her I understood, and I apologized for being so paranoid about it. We didn't talk about it for a couple of weeks. I had almost forgotten all about it. But then I found my wife's second phone. I was digging through her purse looking for some mints, and I found a chintzy plastic phone that I knew nothing about. I turned it on and found everything I had been looking for on her other phone. There were hundreds of text messages between her and an unsaved number. It was the only number being contacted on the phone at all. On top of that, there were some pictures being sent and received. It was very discreet. They didn't use any names for the most part, and there were no pictures showing their faces. I found one slip-up that clued me into who it was. The man messaged my wife and told her that Veronica was going to her sister's for the weekend. He then suggested that she could sneak in through the back door, and they could be together however many times they wanted that weekend. I heard the name Veronica countless times from my wife. She was one of the other women that planned a lot of community events with her. My wife hated her. She would always complain to me about how uppity she was and how she made everybody else feel like they were lesser than her. I knew then that her feelings toward Veronica were because she saw her as competition for the man she was sleeping with. I also knew that Veronica was married to the man I found in my kitchen that day. I had forgotten all about that incident and now I couldn't help but think that something else had been going on when I walked in. I was heartbroken and angry about everything. My wife had lied to me and hidden an affair for me. I had even asked her at one point about cheating and she lied directly to my face. They were having an affair and sleeping with each other in the homes of their respective families. It was disrespectful and completely disgusting. I knew I was going to divorce my wife, but I wanted to do something else. I wanted to do something to get back at her. During the summer, our neighborhood planned a lot of parties and get-togethers. Memorial Day was coming up and I knew that there would be a large party with fireworks and everything. I knew it would be a perfect time to publicly embarrass both her and the man she was sleeping with in front of everyone. They would be the talk of the town after I was done with them. The evening of the party came and everybody was gathered around having a good time. My wife was with her group of friends and I saw the man she was sleeping with talking to another husband. I walked around and mingled with some people, catching up with them at first. Whenever they asked me about what I'd been up to, I told them that I was filing for divorce. They were shocked and they would tell me that they had no idea we were having problems. Then I would tell them that my wife didn't even know about them. I would explain that she was having an affair and I would tell them everything that I knew. I watched as the rumor mill started working. The news was spreading through the party like wildfire. My wife was getting a lot of weird looks and I could tell that she was catching on to something going on. She walked over to me in the middle of the party and asked me about it. She thought that she was having some kind of wardrobe malfunction or maybe said something to upset someone. I couldn't help but laugh at how blind she was to the truth. I told her that I was filing for divorce that following Tuesday because I found out about her affair. She tried to cover it up and say that there was nothing to find out about, but then I told her I found her phone. She was silent after that. While we were talking, word was still being spread throughout the neighborhood. I watched as Veronica walked over to her husband and slapped him across the face. He didn't know why she did that, but she yelled at him that their relationship was over in front of everyone. Then she walked over to my wife. I could see the anger in her eyes as she approached. Part of me was kind of worried that they would get into an actual fight. I worried there could be some way I might be implicated in it because I started it by telling everyone about the affair. Veronica pointed her finger in my wife's face and called her every name in the book. My wife was ghostly pale as she said everything. My wife ended up running back to our house in tears. One of our neighbors approached me and offered to have our kids over for a sleepover, and I thanked them for their help. Their kids were good friends with ours anyway. I went home and my wife instantly tried to explain what happened. She tried to make it seem like I was never there for her when she needed me, but that was bogus. Eventually, I got the truth out of her. She had been talking to one of her friends who was having an affair, and they recommended it to her and everyone else. Her friend said she felt younger and desired, and it boosted her confidence. All of that seemed very enticing to my wife, so when the neighbor down the street showed interest in her, she reciprocated. I was disgusted by the answer. I just can't help but think that if she was having issues with her confidence or feeling desired, she could have come to me. We could have talked about it and I could have done something to make her feel that way. But instead, she decided to throw away 15 years of a relationship. I ended up divorcing her, and with all of the evidence that I collected, she was awarded nothing in the divorce. I didn't want anything to do with the house she cheated on me in, so I ended up selling it. I took the money from that and I bought a new house in a new neighborhood away from the snakes that encouraged my wife to cheat. Now I'm just trying to get into a new rhythm with my life and my children and find happiness after all of this.